Hello, listeners. Jordan here. I just want to let you know that you can listen to Nighttime early and ad-free on Amazon Music. Include it with Prime. This episode of Nighttime is brought to you by Mastercard.
You are listening to the Nighttime Podcast.
Hello, listeners, and welcome to a special edition episode of Nighttime, where we're going to explore one of the most urgent and rapidly evolving threats facing Canadians today, cybercrime. As we release this episode in recognition of both Cybersecurity Awareness Month and Small Business Month, we're going to delve into how these digital crimes impact both individuals and businesses alike. Joining us will be two expert guests. Amisha Parikh, Vice President of Security Solutions at Mastercard, is going to provide insights into how Mastercard is combating cyber threats, and Detective David Coffey from the Toronto Police Service's Financial Unit will share his experiences serving on the front lines of fighting cybercrime. From pretending to be a grandchild in trouble with the law to taking over your cell phone remotely, we're going to discuss the common schemes being reported here in Canada and what you can do to protect yourself and your business in this increasingly connected world. Throughout the episode, we'll highlight some recent Canadian cases that have made headlines, revealing just how widespread and damaging these attacks can be. Whether you're a small business owner or simply looking to protect yourself online, listen, take notes, and tell everyone you know about this episode, as awareness is going to be our ultimate defense. So let's get started here. To begin, I'm going to jump into my recent conversation about cybercrime in Canada with Amisha Parikh, VP of Security Solutions for Mastercard. Just to begin, Amisha, I'd love to hear a bit about your background and your education. I wonder how someone ends up in the position of Vice President of Security Solutions for Mastercard.
Yes, I started my education journey in science. I have a Bachelor of Science from the University of Waterloo, and then I had subsequently done a Master's of Business at Wilfrid Laurier University. It's interesting then, followed a path of some interest in finance, interest in technology, and had this opportunity of being exposed to cybersecurity and really an interest in how it affects people every day. I've recently studied cybersecurity leadership at the University of Oxford to sort of round out some of my academic background. But a lot of the learning happens in sort of what's happening every day in industry and working with a lot of our customers and our partners.
Just a bit more about your role. What kind of responsibilities do you have? Is it specifically fighting cybercrime and developing tools to prevent cyber criminals from, affecting your business and your customers? What other tasks do you take on in this position?
Yeah, when you think about how consumers transact in the ecosystem, both in person and digitally, we're seeing, rapid digitization, unprecedented levels of connectivity, exponential growth in data. And this has fueled cybercrime, as an industry. I mean, in fact, cybercrime is now, and this is staggering, but it's the world's third largest economy, only coming in behind the United States and China. When you think about that in terms of just size, the importance of safeguarding every step of that journey and every sort of, corner of the ecosystem is so important. And that's really, when I think about the role myself and my team and the role we play at Mastercard is really looking at solutions to, mitigate risk at every step along that continuum or that journey.
What I'd like to hear about a bit is how cybercrime and digital security has changed during your career. Like, when did you start, and what are kind of the developing trends since you began this kind of work?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I've been at Mastercard for just over 5 years. I think we can all agree that, we've seen growing digitization, growing e-commerce volumes. I think the pandemic, further accelerated a trend that we were already seeing. But as more of these interactions take place online, the unintended consequences of that is that there's just more information available, and there's information available on the internet. Right? The internet has become sort of this huge, enormous data set that's available about, stuff about ourselves, our families, our businesses. And this opens the door for the bad actors in the ecosystem who can leverage this information, especially as it starts to become stored and shared on places like the dark web. We hear about this dark web or this kind of mysterious place, but there's so much data and it's actually become very productized in terms of how it's supported there. In addition to the proliferation of sensitive data online, there's increased fraud being driven by the development of fraud operations as an industry, right? There are entire call centers that are set up where people are just working on facilitating scams. And the availability of evolving technology that we've seen, such as AI, although AI itself isn't new, some of these use cases are newer, but these technologies are extremely powerful. And they enable so many valuable use cases for what we as consumers, as businesses are going to be able to do. But they have also been used to develop threats. And I think this balance is something that I've really seen as a huge change, or sort of over the last 5 to 10 years, due to the increase in computing power, but also just the sheer volume of data and information that's available for consumption by computers. And it really lends to the fact that there's, never been a more critical need for like holistic cybersecurity solutions to support businesses, governments, consumers, around the world. You've asked a question about, earlier about just Mastercard and the role, we play in this. And I think it's important I just wanted to highlight that Mastercard, we are a technology company in the payments industry. A lot of times people think about us as a credit card company in a network, but we do play in the space of technology, and we lead through technology by operating, our payments network, building industry leading products and solutions. And cybersecurity is a big focus area around that. And we're really committed to building a better, more secure digital economy for everyone, especially as we're seeing more and more of these interactions move online. And we're invested in our own best practices, but really in part around also sharing them, because collaboration is so important as we think about fighting fraud, because this can't be done alone. And as I mentioned, it's a collaborative effort, and really something where we all need to be, coming together as fraud fighters.
I have a plan for us here. I've collected a series of news reports from Global News that outline some of the more common types of cybersecurity scams. And maybe you can give some insight on what's being done to fight these individual types of cybercrimes. The first one I want to talk about is something I've heard referred to as the SIM card swap scam. I know the Toronto police just had a large bust related to this. They called it Project Disrupt. This one surprised me because this involves scammers being able to take over your cell phone. And, when we talk about cybersecurity and information on the internet, you often think of like your home laptop or, logging into banking. But I don't think a lot of people realize how important it is to maintain control of your cell phone.
Actually, in a big city like ours, millions of people rely on their cell phones for everything from phoning somebody to texting to buying theater tickets to paying phone bills. But increasingly, scammers are finding ways to convince the phone company, your phone company, that they are somebody like you, meaning they want to take over your account. And increasingly, this is what's working, and it's a whole lot of trouble, a whole lot of cost for you. Now, we came back here to Toyko today to speak to. They were scammed last fall out of $144,000. They've not gotten money back or an apology from their mobile phone carrier. Now, one phone was SIM swapped by fraudsters who were able to convince the carrier to give them access to his phone. They changed passwords on financial accounts. The money was gone. It's a growing problem. The Toronto Police Financial Crimes Unit has just wrapped up Project Disrupt, which led to 10 arrests. Police allege the suspects used fake ID to convince phone companies to turn over access to them. 1,500 cell accounts in Canada known to be compromised. 2 suspects are still being sought. Police say two-factor authentication, where your phone is used to verify access to financial accounts, may no longer be your best idea.
The two-factor verification, it should be shut down. It's not working. That's the whole problem. Them and the carriers not protecting your assets.
Now, awareness is very important here. A telltale sign that your phone may have been compromised under this scam is you all of a sudden see the letters SOS at the top of your phone. They appear, and that should show that your phone has effectively been taken over by somebody else. It's no longer usable by you, at which point you should contact your phone company and take defensive measures with your other accounts that could be linked onto your phone.
So, Amisha, when you hear that clip, what scares me is I know, like with my cell phone, I just open it up and I can get into my banking, into my emails, into my database of who my friends and family are. The idea that someone could use like some basic social engineering to trick my cell phone provider into giving them access to this, that's terrifying. What's your reaction to these kinds of stories?
Yeah, I mean, I will say it is scary, and fraud fighters have a very difficult job, right? I mean, technology is constantly evolving, and the bad actors, they don't have guardrails. They're going out there and they're finding ways to exploit users. And so it's really just important for us to stay, aware of these new developments and approaches to risk management. And swim swap fraud, as you mentioned, is essentially a fraudster gaining control of a phone number by assuming an identity and then convincing the mobile provider to port the number to a different SIM card. And the risk of this is really broad because, as we heard on the clip, two-factor authentication, which usually has a text message with a passcode, and further broadens the access from the phone into other, email accounts, bank accounts, social media accounts, that fraudster is really trying to gain access to essentially get into these other accounts that the individual holds to get information like payment information, credit card, banking, crypto accounts, for their own financial gain. And this idea of one-time passwords, which, were put in place to provide an added layer of protection, sort of don't work anymore, right? If your identity gets stolen, because fraudsters are getting around the requirement by calling and pretending, to be a legitimate organization, such as a post office or a bank or a trusted entity, and also taking information in that way. The use of biometrics and AI for frictionless security is really an advancing technology to help mitigate some of this risk. And something that's necessary as we think about the future of online transactions and making them safer and more accessible. And really what this means is biometrics replaces things like the passwords with the person, right? So only your biometrics, like your fingerprint or, an iris scan, can unlock a passkey, giving you access to applications or on your phone or a website that you're using, making it still very convenient, but also far more secure. It's harder to replicate. Yeah. At Mastercard, we're making it easy for businesses to integrate this type of biometrics when logging into apps or websites, making purchases online. We have something called the Mastercard Biometric Authentication Service, which helps really resolve the friction and vulnerability that this endless cycle of passwords and multi-factor authentication prompts can create. And it moves that digital experience for consumers to become something more secure. But really important as we think about the example that you've just shared. But the other thing, just as all of us as consumers, we need to continue to stay vigilant because things like SIM swap fraud are real. We even hear instances of it happening and the SIM being swapped out and then being swapped back. So if this happens overnight while you're sleeping, you may not even see that SOS message on your mobile device. Wow. So it's really just important that consumers have good cyber hygiene, that you're wary of suspicious emails or texts, that you're, looking at transactions and flagging anything that seems abnormal, and that you're leveraging, as many layers of security protection as you can, and moving to channels like biometric authentication wherever possible. Wow. It's like and avoiding to linking things like your accounts to your phone number.
Yeah, it is like a science fiction movie, and with this like kind of battleground being fought with technology being used as being leveraged in every different way. And also like a story like the SIM card swap, it just shows how many players are involved in protecting consumers, because it's, the front line at the cell phone call center as well needs to be on their toes. The consumer needs to be watching, every step of the way to be mindful of what's happening. And then people like Mastercard developing the technology to allow all these people to keep themselves safe. It's a very complicated world, which brings me to the next common scam I see specifically here in Nova Scotia and on the east coast of Canada. We've had a lot of this, and people refer to it as the grandparent scam, which is a cyber scam specifically targeting the elderly, and in many cases the more vulnerable. I'm going to play a news clip about the grandparent scam.
I picked up my landline telephone, and it was a person who claimed to be an RCMP officer. He said something about a grandson. Well, I don't have a grandson, but I said, nephew. Then they discovered 3 pounds of marijuana in the back. And I said to him, well, are you looking for bail? And of course, that led right into what he wanted. And he said, yes.
Just like that, a phone call from a stranger claiming to be an officer with a made-up story about a loved one in legal trouble, and the 78-year-old Toronto man was about to fall for a popular scam.
I could have delivered $10,000 downtown to a courthouse here, or I could get the cash and a courier with a password would come and pick it up.
Bill, you handed over $10,000 cash.
Yeah, that's right.
It didn't end there for Bill, whose identity we've agreed to protect.
But he wanted more. So that was another $15,000.
Known as the grandparent scam, fraudsters target older people who are duped into thinking a grandchild or a loved one needs emergency cash.
What do you want other people to know?
I'm coming on here to warn people, if something doesn't sound right, don't do it.
What I find so concerning about that, aside from just the moral depravity of preying on seniors like this and the vulnerable, is someone like the man we hear in the story. He's likely not as in touch with cybersecurity and the everyday cyber scams that are out there that you or I or people of our generation would be. I don't know what the answer is to protect people like this, aside from just getting these stories out there and letting them know, what risks are there. What are your thoughts and experiences with things like the grandparent scam?
Yeah, I mean, as you touched upon, it's obviously they're preying on a segment of the population that may not be as tech savvy or aware. This one specifically, in 2023, the Canadian Anti-Fraud Commission had received reports of over $11 million in losses due to emergency and grandparent scams. And that was just what was reported in the year. Mm-hmm. This likely represents, 5 to 10% of what the actual losses are, according to the RCMP and the Canadian Anti-Fraud Commission. And the reason for that even is that there is some embarrassment around this, right? People believe that they're vigilant. And then when you feel like, oh gosh, I fell for it, because in that moment, right, your emotions and your desire to help somebody, a loved one, or in this case, a grandchild or a nephew in the example that we just heard, kind of cloud some of your other better judgment. We know cyber criminals are becoming even more sophisticated in how they scam Canadian consumers and businesses. They're using cutting edge technology. I mean, 2 common uses, we've been talking a bit about just the use of artificial intelligence, but the use of that for impersonation through voice cloning. This really uses AI to replicate the tone and the language of an individual, which is ideal for convincing someone that they're having a genuine conversation with that person. And then we often hear about this term deep fakes, right? And that's really taking the use of AI one step further and taking seemingly legitimate audio and pairing it with video. Scammers are able to not only replicate voice, but also the appearance of either a familiar face or even somebody famous. And we hear these in news stories all the time. And then software is then used to make that person say and do things before it's being either shared or posted online or on a phone call. And unfortunately, these sophisticated approaches to scams means the threat of things like grandparent scams will continue to persist. And they can be, initiated through a variety of channels, on phone call, through a text message, an email, social media, but it results in an authorized transfer of payment to the fraudster. And this is the part that becomes really challenging. We think about who we serve at Mastercard, and a large part of our customer base are banks. And for them, spotting these fraudulent payments among millions of transactions is like looking for a needle in a haystack, because victims are sending the money themselves, right? They are authorizing either transferring the funds or giving over the funds. And so scammers aren't actually breaking any security measures in committing this fraud as far as the bank is concerned. And victims often don't realize that they're a victim of the scam until after the payment is sent. Often the funds have already disappeared into a series of money mule accounts controlled by criminals or into alternative payment currency exchanges like crypto exchanges, making them really difficult to trace. And therefore, the key to combating this is really early detection. In early 2024, Mastercard had announced something called Scam Protect, which is a suite of specialized solutions powering AI technologies. And it's really focused on identifying and preventing fraud across what we call the scam life cycle. It's crazy to think that now we're talking about scam having a life cycle, but so prevalent. And that's really, when we talk about the life cycle, it's everything from when a user opens an account, when they log in, when they make account changes, add authorized users, to when they're carrying out an actual transaction. Earlier this year, we also announced consumer fraud risk in the UK, which is applying this technology to a network level view of payments. Mastercard's consumer fraud risk examines the recipient's account activity. So things like the account name, the value of payments, the relationship between the sending and the receiving accounts, and really starts to flag risky payments in real time and alert banks to stop those transfers, to pause them, to flag them, and really look to validate. These types of scams, grandparent scams, and any type of kind of relationship scam really shakes confidence in consumers and can start to erode trust in the overall digital economy. So being able to share this type of data and scaling detection and advancing protection is so important. The one thing I just did want to note is that as we talk about early detection, is that for individuals and your family members, it's really crucial that if you think you've been scammed, to report it as soon as possible, because that ability to be able to identify it early can sometimes allow for some of the tracing. The other thing that I think even I use in my own household is household passwords. And that's just things to be able to confirm identity between you and your loved ones by something as simple as like a word or a phrase that's only known within your family, to be able to, circumvent some of what these fraudsters are doing in terms of impersonation.
In the story we just heard with the grandparent scam, it was scammers targeting a vulnerable segment of our population. I have another common scam that I want to share with you here that also involves, I think, probably a lot of the similar elements at play, which is the romance scam. I'm going to play a clip here about a romance scam case in Canada.
My mom was the type of woman that if you were good to her, she opened her heart. These people poisoned her.
Poisoned her with words of love. The vulnerable 74-year-old apparently yearned to hear.
I love you more than words can say.
Behind those words, a man who said he was a sergeant in the U.S. military. A man who for 2.5 years drained her dry.
This person convinced her to sell her home. 1,000, 5,000, 5,000.
She was even flagged and fined for trying to send $36,000 in cash across the border.
These people are so sick. They go to so many different lengths.
Romance scams are growing in size and sophistication. From January to September of this year, the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre received 650 reports of such scams targeting 532 victims, resulting in a dollar loss of $29.8 million.
My mom basically was giving everything to this person.
It's not only about the money lost. She believes this scam caused her mom to lose the will to live, stopping her medication and basically starving herself.
My mom didn't even look like my mother when she passed away.
And when the family tried to step in and intervene, transfer her from Ontario to Canmore, it was too late. She was gone.
These people took everything from my mother. They took my mother. I want these people caught. I want these people stopped.
Amisha, when you hear that story, it reminds me so much of the grandparent scam, except preying on, this is just finding, a lonely person and slowly peeling away their finances through a variety of means, much like we talked about in the prior stories. How do you react to a story like this?
Yeah, it is heartbreaking. I mean, cybercrime is just, it'll reiterate just the size of impact. Globally, costs and losses from cyber attacks and scams are estimated to reach, over $10 trillion in 2025, according to Cybersecurity Ventures. That's a huge number. And when we look at the types of scams, romance scams often rank as one of the top 3 types of scams across many geographies. Because as you mentioned, we do see that there are segments of the population that are lonely, that are looking for connection, that are, looking for companionship. And unfortunately, these fraudsters are preying upon that. And even as awareness grows, the efforts of fraudsters to build relationships, build trust, can really lead to individuals letting their guard down and becoming more vulnerable to the risk. So the threat of romance fraud, similar to grandparents fraud, will likely continue to persist. And I mean, this is also, I think the other ones that we see ranking behind this are investment fraud, emergency scams, identity theft, all common. And as I mentioned, about how Mastercard is helping to arm banks with technology to try to identify some of these scams in real time and really identify where we're starting to see the transfer of money and transactions happening. That's really half the battle. Sometimes victims aren't always ready to accept, right, that they've been scammed. And even once a bank or your financial institution flags something being, abnormal, they still need the individual to say, yes, okay, pause the transaction, don't send it. And fraudsters have really become masters of like psychological manipulation. They create a false sense of urgency. The victim feels kind of flustered. They feel like, maybe they don't take that moment to assess, hey, the situation, and is this real? Does this feel like maybe I should, that sort of hesitation. And that can really happen with a lot of these types of scam. And victims of longer cons, so these romance scams, they build up those relationships and trust over time. And it's often in these cases where the victims are, almost the last ones to recognize that the person on the other end was actually a fraudster, because they spend months fabricating an online relationship with victims. They encourage sometimes them to, build so much trust that they disengage from others within their community or their circles, their family, their friends, or anyone who really raises doubt that is this a real relationship, because they're really preying on that emotion and desire for companionship. Real life examples like this, it shows the devastating financial and emotional impact on victims. And I think awareness is so important. And I think we all, in businesses, governments, and even as individuals, all have a responsibility to continue to share these stories, build awareness, so that individuals can stay, vigilant, alert, be mindful. And then obviously, in the industry that we play in, we also have an accountability to continue to bring these types of technologies and create a safety net around the actual transfer of money, to ensure that we safeguard the payments ecosystem.
I have one more for you here. This is another common scam, often referred to simply as the job scam. And I find this one has an interesting twist, because it seems that not only are they trying to get money from the victim, but they're also trying to convert the victim into something between like a money mule and a money launderer. I'm going to play this for you and then get your take on this common type of scam.
Yeah, well, when we're talking about job scams, primarily what they're trying to do is they're trying to facilitate money laundering. A lot of cases. So the job scams may entail things like, okay, you've got this great job, we're going to pay you all this money, we're going to send you a check. They'll send you a check, and then they'll invariably ask you to move that money around. Here's a $10,000 check. You need 2,000 of it to set up your office. Send the rest of it, the remainder of it, to this bank account or to this bank account. And essentially what they're doing is they're creating money mules. They're turning their victims into money mules to facilitate money laundering, to move around criminal ill-gotten gain. I mean, the job scam is also out there to make money off you. So it's not just facilitating money laundering, but it's also to take your money.
So here's the bottom line. If you receive one of those too good to be true job offers, treat it like a red flag. Stay smart and stick to verified job postings. Avoid chasing after those red flags. And remember, you're not just protecting yourself, you're helping others too. Keep your eyes peeled, stay safe out there, and happy job hunting.
So again, a lot like the prior scams we've discussed, but this one just seems to have a different layer where it involves getting this person to do kind of the more traditional, like boots on the ground scam, like cashing fake checks and stuff. what is your reaction or your fear with hearing about these kinds of scams?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's another example of where fraudsters are identifying maybe a need or preying on sort of an emotional, like looking for a job is something that's highly stressful for
Yeah.
people. And so the promise of like employment and being able to get a paycheck quickly and stuff are appealing, especially when you've got somebody who's been frustrated through this process for a long time. And so again, I think it's similar to the examples around the romance scams and the grandparent scams. It's just another example where they're exploiting those vulnerabilities. And then ultimately somebody's getting duped into doing something, whether it's inadvertently becoming a money mule. There's a term that's used around forced criminality, and where somebody doesn't realize, right, that they are now becoming part of this fraudulent network. But this is an example where somebody could get duped into doing that. There's also two sides when you think about the types of theft or who the victims are. Sometimes they also there's identity theft around stealing someone's identity so that that person looks like somebody who's legitimate and reliable, and they're trying to recruit you through this, right? So there's almost even two sides of the identity theft around the person who is trying to commit the scam and stealing someone's identity to do so, and then preying around somebody. So I think the importance of just the vigilance, being mindful of any time that you're sharing information, not sharing information online to anyone that's kind of not a known entity without things like proper authentication tools and methods are just all really, really critical. And I think in all of these scams, unfortunately, we've always got to second guess before we share any of our information. And I think that's just another important takeaway here, that all of these vulnerabilities are being exposed by fraudsters. And so we need to kind of stay one step ahead.
Yeah. Now, speaking of staying a step ahead, something we've talked about a lot during our conversation here is artificial intelligence and the way cyber criminals are able to use that to appear more legitimate. How growing of a concern is AI and the ability for scammers to use these language models or voice models to appear more legitimate? Like how much worry is going into this?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's as we see this proliferation of new technologies, they're very powerful and they come with a tremendous number of valuable, useful, productive use cases. But the fraudsters are also, it's empowering, right, the bad actors in the ecosystem, the fraudsters, to use the same tools. And unfortunately, they don't operate with the same guardrails or within the same regulatory environment. So they're out there and they're like, we will try anything. I think as fraudsters increase in sophistication by using things like AI to achieve scams, we also need to be leveraging this technology to enhance protections to keep, consumers and the entire payments network safe. At Mastercard, we do leverage AI solutions, and I've touched upon that to really look at increasing fraud detection. We've seen that AI in itself has increased detection by 2 to 3 times. Our AI technology alone has stopped or deflected over $20 billion in fraud attacks over the last 12 months.
Wow.
So in terms of just the power of using these same tools to combat the risk, it's really important. What's interesting about all these examples is we've talked a lot about scams targeting consumers and individuals. We also know that last year, there were over $550 million was lost to fraud in 2023, according to the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre. But this is also happening to small businesses. And we know that small businesses make up 98% of Canada's economy. And so it's also something that we need to be keeping top of mind in terms of the impact and how we safeguard them. We're into Cybersecurity Awareness Month, but it's also Small Business Month in Canada. And so we want to remind small businesses that, this risk is real, and no one is immune from cybersecurity risk. And so we all need to continue to safeguard, right, our businesses and all of our interactions. We do encourage small businesses to visit the Mastercard Trust Center. We have a number of learning journeys that cover cybersecurity core concepts, cyber attack methods, and strategies to protect small businesses, which in turn will safeguard consumers. As part of the Mastercard Trust Center, we also offer small businesses the ability to have a Mastercard cybersecurity assessment tool. And this is really a complimentary cybersecurity assessment complete with strategic recommendations based on the knowledge level of those individual businesses to help give them the tools and also the recommendations in terms of what they should be implementing to safeguard their businesses and protect against risk.
And just speaking of protecting against risk, just to start wrapping it up, maybe you could give some basic steps people or small businesses could take to protect themselves, just some general, like almost best practices that you could share given your experience.
There are small actionable steps for individuals to protect themselves, to businesses to protect themselves from cyber attacks. I mean, we use this term, good cyber hygiene, and we hear it coming up more and more often, and it can really decrease the chance of cyber attacks. And that's everything from simple things like, when you get those updates that come in terms of, your software applications, please, put through an update. Deploy a patch, make sure that you're using the most up-to-date operating system on your mobile device. Those are all basic. Sometimes they're things that we're like, I'll get to it later, but they're really important because a lot of these providers are staying on top of what's happening in terms of risk. Things like, we talk about passwords and strong passwords, but wherever possible, migrating to things like biometric authentication and leveraging things that are on our person and can't be easily replicated. Knowledge sharing is really an important piece of this because there is no, sort of silver bullet in terms of, how to have a fully locked in set of cyber hygiene practices that will ensure that you're never exposed to the risk. But we can definitely take, some of these proper steps. I think staying diligent, alert, mindful in terms of who you're giving your information to, what channels you're providing that information to. We just need to make sure that we're also staying vigilant in terms of our authentication methods, whether we're using biometrics, whether we're using other tools to validate when we're using any of our profiles or accounts. The use of biometrics and AI for frictionless security is just really, really important. So again, I will reiterate that wherever possible, if that option is offered, make sure that you take it up. And then when we think about small businesses, it's really just important that there's awareness and that they're aware of the tools that are available to them to safeguard platforms. We know that, they aren't necessarily able to invest in large scale cybersecurity, whether it be specialists or safeguarding infrastructure, but there's lots of tools that are available to small businesses. And the cybersecurity assessment tool that Mastercard provides really lets small business owners understand their needs and options for free on-demand access to tools and services for small and medium businesses. So I just think there's a lot of just vigilance and just being mindful of authenticating, verifying, being conscious of how and whom you're sending information to, and then ensuring that you're very, very vigilant around money movement and sending money to ensuring that it's not only just a valid account, but that who's on the other side of that account and accepting those funds.
Could you maybe just in a general sense, again, just kind of break down a couple of the main techniques Mastercard is using to protect consumers and small businesses from this variety of cyber scams that we face every day?
Yeah, I mean, Mastercard again is kind of across the continuum. I talked a bit about sort of Scam Protect as being kind of one of the things that we've announced, but it's really looking along the entire life cycle. So at Mastercard, we look at everything from, the verification of identity, supporting banks and merchants with things like account onboarding and opening and verification of that identity. We look at helping to safeguard across any changes to accounts, right? So when you're adding users to a profile, as some of these things we talked about, sort of hesitancy modeling, starting to be able to evaluate different types of behaviors and whether those behaviors seem like they're out of normal patterns of behavior. So it's either could be, the size of a transaction you're sending, who you're sending it to, and really being able to safeguard against that or flag anything that's high risk. And then as we think about the transactions, we talked about the use of AI to really use as a real-time decisioning tool to really help to flag transactions that seem like they could be fraudulent and being able to deflect those. And there's various sort of tools and capabilities that happen both at the network level, at the bank level, and then individually kind of at the merchant level that can help to safeguard that. And then also after a transaction happens, right, being able to support consumers, merchants, and banks as we think about how to look at investigating those transactions where something is deemed to be fraudulent after the fact, and how can we go about and remediate some of that. So I would say it's really across the entire life cycle, leveraging, biometrics, leveraging AI, leveraging a wide range of cybersecurity tools, but we're really committed to keeping the overall payments ecosystem safe and businesses and consumers ensuring that they're protected.
Hello, listeners. In today's digital age, cybersecurity is more important than ever, and Mastercard is at the forefront of technology innovation. As cybercriminals become more sophisticated in their attempts to steal personal and financial data, Mastercard is stepping it up. Leveraging years of experience, Mastercard provides small and medium businesses with a tailor-made approach to support them on their cybersecurity journey with advice, education, and solutions to help. Quite often, cybersecurity is an afterthought for small businesses, who don't have the resources of larger corporations to defend themselves and act once breached. Only 16% of Canadian small business owners feel ready to face a cyber attack, and over half don't even consider themselves a potential target. Mastercard is committed to providing the education and technology solutions to ensure every small and medium enterprise recognizes that the cybersecurity of their business is within their control. With the Mastercard Trust Center, businesses can access a wealth of resources, including research and educational offerings, all designed to help safeguard their operations and reputations. Mastercard has also introduced a free cybersecurity assessment tool to help small business owners better understand their risks and identify the right cybersecurity measures. Now is the time to take proactive steps to defend your business from cyber threats. Visit the Mastercard Trust Center at mastercard.ca/trust for free on-demand resources to ensure your business stays protected. And before we continue here, I want to extend a big thank you to Amisha Parikh for joining us and shedding light on the important role Mastercard plays in keeping us safe. It's clear that staying ahead of cyber threats requires constant vigilance and innovation, and we appreciate her sharing Mastercard's approach to these challenges. Now, we're going to shift gears to the law enforcement perspective. I want to introduce you to Detective David Coffey from the Toronto Police Service's Financial Crimes Unit. Detective Coffey is at the forefront of investigating cybercrime in Canada, from online scams to large-scale breaches affecting businesses. In the upcoming segment, Detective Coffey is going to share his experiences on the ground and what Canadians need to know to protect themselves against these increasingly sophisticated attacks. Detective Coffey, could you maybe just start by giving me a bit of a background on who you are and what your role and responsibilities are in the Toronto Police Service?
Sure, thank you, and thank you for having me. So I'm a detective, Toronto Police Service. I work at the Financial Crimes Unit. So we are the financial crime fighting hub of the Toronto Police Service. We work out of headquarters downtown. And we have three sections that we focus on. Major frauds is a section that I came out of. So they do major crime, major fraud investigations, multi-jurisdictional, the bigger ones, the multi-million-dollar frauds and stuff. So that's where I came from. I was then moved into what's called our Central Fraud Intake Office. And this is where all the reports come into. So this is a central hub of where every report concerning fraud made in the city of Toronto, comes to us, comes to some excellent officers outside my door here. They go through the report, they triage it in effect. So they will look at it, they'll look for avenues of investigation, they'll determine whether it's to be sent to a divisional fraud officer, or if it's to remain here at financial crimes, if it's bigger, or if it's to be concluded outright. One thing we're really proud of, though, here at Central Fraud Intake Office, every single complainant gets contact from us, gets communication. So we communicate them. We say, we advise them of the status of the report, and we tell them why it's being concluded, or the investigator it's going to, and we give them advice on how not to be caught again in whatever scam they were caught up in, and give them tips on what to do to protect themselves. So that's where I work. My primary focus is really doing exactly what I'm doing right now with you, talking about fraud, getting out to communities. I talk to a lot of seniors groups. I get out and talk to them, groups of 40 and 50 people, and teach them and tell them how to protect themselves, because at the end of the day, that I think is the key to fighting fraud.
Could you maybe give me a sense of the scope of, or the variety of the type of reports that you get? Like if you get 10 or 15 reports of potential fraud cases in a day, what are they typically going to be? What comes to you?
Well, first off, if we only got 10 or 15 a day, that would be victory for us. That's really? We get about on average 45 to 50 a day.
Wow. Okay.
To date in 2024, we've got over 12,000 reports submitted already, 12,432 to be exact, over $280 million in damages in Toronto alone. But what do we see? We see everything. And I mean, we see grandparent scams still. Grandparent scams been in the news I came to this office in 2020. Of course, COVID had just started. So grandparent scam really exploded during COVID, as did fraud. All frauds exploded during 2020 because everybody was sitting behind their computer alone in their houses and looking for things to people to meet and money to make and jobs to get. Here in Toronto, I mean, we get plenty of our own grandparent scams. Job scams are huge. Taxi scams are big. And then every day it's all the crypto and the cyber frauds and stuff like that. And that's really when you start getting into the big money, the romance frauds, the investment frauds, phishing. Every day everybody gets text messages and emails in their inbox. Most people, I hope, don't click on those links, but some do. For whatever reason, the planets aligned that day and they click the link. And they've made themselves vulnerable to massive amounts of fraud.
When a report for fraud comes to you, your team's responsibility is to try to figure out who is behind this, see if you can get some of the money back, see if charges can be laid against the people responsible. I can't even imagine how difficult that must be, where so much of the cybercrime we hear is people hiding behind fake profiles and stolen profiles and using technology to mask, where they're even doing this from. Give me a sense of how these cases are investigated and who is responsible for the majority of these cybercrimes that we see.
Right. So sadly, when you're talking about cybercrime, you're talking about the offense that has occurred strictly via your computer or via your cell phone. We have very, very low success rate in investigating. Certainly in making arrests. Certainly in regards to ever getting that money back. So you're literally sending money. And oftentimes it's crypto, so it's a non-regulated currency through a non-regulated agency. Inevitably, you're sending it to an anonymous person across the globe. It's virtually impossible for us to ever get that money back. It's gone. It's across the globe. It's gone into a wallet in Russia, in China, in Africa, anywhere. And it's been mixed with all kinds of other funds, legitimate funds, illegitimate funds. So, and it's behind the anonymity of cryptocurrency and behind the anonymity of that wallet, because the majority of those wallets are created with fake IDs. I often say when I'm in the presentations, I say, fraudsters, when they reach out to you via your phone and your computer, through phishing techniques, through emails, through texts, they're after two things. They're after A, money. They're after B, information. They would far prefer information, because with that information, with your name, with your driver's license number, with your address, the sky is literally the limit. They can do there's infinite possibilities what they can do. And one of the things they do is create fake identities in the crypto world. I was talking yesterday to the guys out here at the job scam. One of the things that, I mean, it makes sense when people go on to an online job finding site and they're talking to what they think is a headhunter. They're talking to what they think is going to be their employer. And they're trying to get this job online. There's been no personal contact. You're not walking into a corporate office somewhere and doing an interview. It's all online. It's all anonymous. And then they're asked to do is, okay, well, we need to verify your identity. So, give us your identity. First of all, what's your name? What's your driver's license number? What's your bank account number? So we can put our money into your bank account when you get paid, of course. And then what we want you to do is we want you to stand up. We want you to hold your driver's license and take a picture of yourself and send us that. And anybody and I haven't, I've just talked to others, anybody who opens up a cryptocurrency account, that's all you need. And that's their KYC, or their know your client security measures that most cryptocurrency agencies utilize. We just need to know who you are. So think of that. We're getting these reports. You're sending off untold thousands of dollars through the internet. The fraudsters are using VPNs, which mask their IP addresses. And even if we are able to track the IP address, inevitably, 99% of the time, it's going to come across it's going to be in Russia. It's going to be in China. It's going to be in Africa. It's going to be in Eastern Europe or Europe. Many places that are not friendly to Canada. Many of them are state sponsored. They're allowed to operate because, hey, nothing Russia and China loves more than destabilizing the West. And this is part of it. So they allow them to act and do in this manner and promote it and sponsor it.
I hear a lot about like gift cards. A part of the scam being, go to the store or go to Walmart or whatever and buy gift cards and send us those, or the codes for the gift cards. Do you hear much of this?
Oh yeah. And things like this, it still makes my head explode. Gift cards are just another form of currency, and that's what they're using them as. So we see these reports. This is you get the emails or the text from the CRA. You owe us this much money. Send us this. You need to pay us now. There's always a sense of urgency with these things. Do it today or else. You'll lose your driver's license. We'll take your house. We'll deport you. Always urgency. That's the biggest, most common red flag in any of these things. So, but oftentimes, whether it be pay us by Bitcoin, go to your local, hey, there's a Bitcoin machine on the corner. We'll even tell you how to go there and open up your own account and send us the money. This is from agencies purporting themselves to be the CRA or the RCMP or, legitimate Amazon, legitimate companies. And they're telling people to go buy $500 worth of gift cards and then mail them to us. And what they're doing is they just liquidate them. They have, $1,000 worth of gift cards. They can sell them online for $800, $500. So they're just liquidating it. It's a form of currency, and it's anonymous.
You mentioned earlier in our talk that a part of your role is giving presentations, giving people some ideas of best practices to avoid putting themselves at risk for this type of crime. So why don't you tell me, like, what are some things, simple things that a Canadian can do to prevent being victimized by this type of crime?
Right. Thank you. And this is my most important role. This is the most important thing I do anymore is trying to prevent fraud.
And that makes sense because the success rate of getting a conviction is so low that prevention would be where you would put your efforts.
Exactly. And it's my own frustration in seeing the number of reports that come in and the number of reports that we're unable to act upon. Like nothing. I mean, we're all police officers here because we want to catch the bad guy. And when we see these reports, these heartbreaking reports, elderly victims being targeted. And it's not just the elderly, we're all targeted, but it's really heartbreaking. Each report is a person or a company that's behind it that has lost money. So, anything that, like I mentioned earlier, urgency is a common red flag.
And a part of that is probably they show a sense of urgency because they want you to do it now. Because if you don't, they just want to move on to the next person.
Well, that, and because they know that if you think about it too much, it doesn't make sense. You know, how much, it doesn't make sense. Send the CRA gift cards. Well, that doesn't make sense, really, when you think about it. And that's what people say afterwards when they make the report. And that's where the shame and embarrassment comes in. People feel so, the word is stupid. I felt so stupid. I fell for it, which is tragic. But it's, the urgency is the key to get people to do these things before they think about it. The grandparent scam. Don't tell anybody. You're not allowed to tell family or friends. And if you do, because the judge has issued an order, a gag order, they don't exist in Canada. But when these people, when the victims get the phone call, I need to get me out of jail now. If you don't get me out today, I'm going to be in for the next week. Don't tell anybody. Don't tell my mom. Don't tell my dad. Don't tell family and friends, because they know too, if you think about it, or if you communicate with your family and your friends, you're going to know it's a fraud. So things to do, I mean, anything that comes into your cell phone, into your email, that is spontaneous, that you haven't sought out yourself. So whether it comes into your phone one day and all of a sudden you get an email or a text from the CRA, from Amazon, from any of these companies that we all get these texts for, delete them. Just delete them. The harm of deleting an actual legitimate text or email is infinitesimal compared to the damages that can be accrued by clicking on that link. Like I said, money or information. You click on that link, either a form's going to pop up saying, hey, we got your package here. We need you to pay for it now to release it, and you'll get it tomorrow. And what they're counting on there, of course, is we all order packages. You know, a small percentage of the population is always waiting for a package to arrive. So when I talk about the planets aligning, that email comes in. If you're not expecting any package, well, that's easy to delete. But it's the people who are expecting one. And maybe, you know, it's coming in a week, but now it's saying, hey, it can come tomorrow if you pay this fee. So links, I mean, phishing email and text, delete. Urgency, slow everything down. Slow down. When you approach, and this is anything, somebody knocks on your door and says you need your roof repaired. Somebody approaches you at the gas station and say, you know, they've lost their debit card. Can you give me cash to pay for my gas? Taxi scam. All these things. Slow everything
what
down.
Is sorry, you mentioned the taxi scam a couple times. What is this?
The original one is simply getting into, and it happens a lot generally here in Toronto, in the entertainment district, the club district, late at night. What they're counting on is people coming out of the bars, maybe a little intoxicated, and they're just cars. They could be a black car, and people have put taxi signs on their roof. They're counting on people getting into the taxi, and then what happens is so they're not legitimate taxis. They're not legitimate taxi drivers. And what they're counting on is that when they get you home, they say, oh, I don't take cash. I only take debit or credit. So what they want to do is they'll hand you their POS machine, point of sale machine. They'll get you to put in your code. And then inevitably, oh, it doesn't work. Oh, let me see it. I'll fix it for you. Boom, boom. So now you've entered your code. You've now handed them your debit card so they can do it. And then what they do is generally it's late at night. You've been drinking. They'll switch your card. So they give you a fake card back. So now they've got your PIN number because you've entered it, and they've got your card. So then what they're doing is they immediately go to an ATM and they take out as much money as they can. And then that's depending on, you know, maximum withdrawals at your bank, you can get a few $1,000s generally. So that evolved somewhat because we put out a lot of alerts on it. That evolved to, hey, being approached on the street by some, you know, vulnerable looking individual. It could be like a teenager, it could be, you know, whatever. And they say, hey, sir, the taxi driver won't take my cash. They only take debit. So again, they want you, I'll give you the cash if you pay for my taxi with your debit card. And again, what you're doing is you're handing over your debit card and you're putting in your PIN. And then they're switching your card. So at the end of the day, you're handing control of your debit card over to a stranger.
Wow.
So that's a taxi scam, and that's prevalent and stuff. And again, it's urgent. Please help me, help me.
Yeah, a good advice that you said. Even is just slow down.
Yeah.
When this stuff is happening, well, this doesn't seem right. Let's just, chill out on this. Let's talk this out.
Yeah.
Because I think so many of the scams, you're right. It's this instant, like, let's react, let's do this. It's an emergency. This whirlwind happens, and then you're left holding the bag and calling the Toronto Police Service.
Every victim of a fraud tells us it felt weird. I didn't think it sounded right. Something sounded weird. But they ignore the voice. They ignore the warning signs. They recognize it, and later they'll recognize their recognition that they knew that something was off. But the vulnerabilities that are being targeted are good-hearted Canadians. We're trying to help people and stuff like that, so we ignore the voice. So exactly what you said: slow down, and listen to the voice. Exactly.
We talked a lot about people getting in cabs, the grandmother scam, these romance scams, but what about like a business and small businesses even? Because I see on the news things like this major grocery store is shut down because of a cyber attack. I wonder how like a small business, like a laundromat, for example, or a retail store is able to protect themselves. What kind of reports do you get of fraud targeting small business?
Well, business in general, like you said, is targeted often the same way, and it's through, businesses can have the best security protocols in place. They can have the best firewalls. They can have, all kinds of checks and balances within their system. Bigger companies can afford more of those security protocols. They're still victimized. They're still vulnerable because at the end of the day, there's a human making decisions. There's a human picking up the phone and talking to somebody. There's a human clicking the link on an email that seems to be from their boss, where really it's not. So a small business is more vulnerable even then because they don't have all those security protocols to the extent that a big business does. At the same time, they may have an advantage because a small business, they see you're all in one building, perhaps, or your boss is in the office down the street or down the hall, kind of thing. So you can go down. It's all about checking. It's all about verifying. So when you and businesses are generally targeted through email compromise. So the person responsible for the check for the payroll will get an email saying, "Hey, we're changing our bank this month. Change it to this bank account." Well, there's again, red flag, right? Everything should be verified. Just verify, check and balance. The more prolific fraud gets, the more levels of verification there needs to be. Small business, like I said, they are vulnerable. They are targeted. Fraudsters think they're an easier prey. They have some advantages in other ways, as I discussed, but yeah, they're big payoffs for the fraudsters, right? Companies have more money than individuals. They have more money than me, and they have more money than grandparents and stuff like that. So companies and information hacking is also a target. They want all the account information. They want all that payroll information and things like that.
And customer information.
Huge.
People are after money and information if they can get access to a small business's list of customers.
Which may include credit cards, which may include bank accounts, which may include all that kind of stuff. So money and information, absolutely.
As I got into with Amisha, AI is turning this whole thing on its head and its ability to generate language or generate voices. So the idea that someone would call and you're barely even able to understand their English or whatnot, those seem to be becoming a thing of the past.
And the word is technology. The last great leap of fraud was the internet. I mean, before the internet, fraudsters, I still remember growing up and getting letters in the mail and from the Nigerian prince, it was literally a letter. Please help me. And now it's a click of a button. They can send out to millions of people, right? So that was the last technological leap was the internet. Fraud, I mean, it just exploded with the internet. The next technological leap is artificial intelligence. It's going to wreak havoc. It can be used as a tool to fight it as well. And that's when a lot of the financial institutions and police services, when we catch up, can use it as well. But in the meantime, I mean, deep fakes, even emails. I mean, as short a time ago as 2-3 years ago, when you got these emails, you could look at it and you would find the inevitable spelling mistakes. You would find the inevitable grammatical errors. They're essentially perfect now. They are literally perfect because they're generated by AI. It's going to look exactly like your mobile phone company. It's going to look like Amazon. It's going to look like the CRA government websites. They're literally perfect. So you just have to increase your level of vigilance. You just have to be, and it's sad because we almost have to today as Canadians, we have to live in this constant state of vigilance of everything that we see and hear. You have to have a healthy amount of skepticism that says, that doesn't seem right. And again, the common things are going to be there. Urgency, send me money, that's what fraud is. It's all about money and information. If ever you're on a romance, on a relationship online, sure, is there legitimate online dating sites? Of course there is. But they're populated by fraudsters now. So if you're having an online relationship with somebody and it gets to the topic of money, goodbye. Say goodbye, because that is the red flag.
I want to thank you for joining my guests and I for this episode of Nighttime. I hope that our discussion gave you some valuable insight in the risks we're facing and the signs to look out for. My big takeaway personally is that awareness is our ultimate defense. As once the damage is done, it's very hard to reverse. I guess the old saying applies here, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And with that said, I'm going to start wrapping up this episode, but before we part, I'm going to end with thanks. First, a huge thanks to Amisha Parikh and Detective David Coffey for spending some time with me and with you, the listeners of Nighttime. I want to give a shout out to LJ from the Dystopian Simulation podcast, who provides my intro and outro voiceovers, and Monty Datta, who provides the music for this series. And then lastly, but of course most importantly, a massive thank you goes out to each and every one of you listening to Nighttime, as without your interest and your support, this show would be as pointless as it would be impossible. And on the topic of support, let me thank the newest subscribers of the premium feed. Don, Dave, and Jennifer, we appreciate you. And for anyone else who'd like to support the show, you can do it in a variety of ways. First of all, a premium feed subscription costs just a couple bucks a month, and that money funds the creation of new episodes. But the premium feed will also give you those episodes 2 days early, give them to you ad-free, and give you access to a full back catalog of Nighttime episodes. If that sounds like something you're interested in, you can go premium at nighttimepodcast.com/subscribe. And even if you can't go premium, you can still support this show by simply sharing this episode on social media and letting all your like-minded friends know why you're listening. If anyone out there has any story ideas or wants to give feedback on the show or submit a question or comment for an upcoming episode, you can do all that and more at nighttimepodcast.com/contact. I look forward to hearing from you. And until next time, take care of each other, hug your loved ones tight, and let me know if you see anything weird.
The Nighttime Podcast is written, hosted, and produced by Jordan Bonaparte.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me today. It's been really great to chat through these things, and these are all unfortunately real and prevalent, and I think very timely in terms of just being able to share these, and hopefully all awareness is good awareness, right? To keep people safe.